When a man steps into his 60s, 70s, or even his 80s and he's living alone, people tend to jump to conclusions. Some immediately assume he must be lonely. Others quietly wonder if he's struggling to keep things together. There's this unspoken narrative that a man on his own at that age must somehow be incomplete. But the truth? The reality of older men who live alone is much deeper, much more layered, and in many cases, much more empowering than most people ever imagine. Let me start with a story. A few years ago, I met a man named Arthur. He was 79 years old, living by himself in a small but spotless apartment. No wife. No partner. No steady stream of visitors coming through the door. Everything in his space had a place, and everything about him felt steady. Out of curiosity, I asked him, "Arthur, how do you manage everything on your own?" He smiled at me in a way that only comes from decades of lived experience and said, "Son, people think a man falls apart when he lives alone. But sometimes, living alone is the first time he truly learns how to live." That answer stayed with me. It challenged every quiet assumption I didn't even realize I had. And as I continued speaking with more older men, and as I dug into psychological and geriatric research, something became very clear. Society has misunderstood single senior men for a long time. There are powerful truths about them that every older adult and every family member needs to understand. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, how old are you? Drop your age in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Still Becoming. This channel is dedicated to helping seniors grow stronger, wiser, and more confident with every passing year. Now, let's talk about the first surprising truth. Older men who live alone are often emotionally stronger than people think. The world tends to paint seniors living alone as fragile, isolated, maybe even depressed. But research shows something different. Many older men who live on their own develop a quiet, powerful emotional resilience. They adapt. They build routines. They learn how to sit with silence. They discover how to manage their emotions without constantly leaning on someone else for reassurance. That emotional self-reliance becomes a kind of hidden strength. Arthur once told me that living alone forced him to finally face his own thoughts. There was no distraction, no constant noise. He had to confront old regrets, past mistakes, unresolved feelings. And instead of breaking him, it refined him. What looked like loneliness from the outside was, in many cases, personal growth on the inside. In fact, several men I spoke with said they feel calmer now than they ever did in their 30s or 40s. There's less pressure to prove themselves. Less chaos. Less emotional turbulence. Solitude gave them clarity. Now here's the second truth, and it surprises a lot of people. Older men who live alone often take greater control of their lifestyle than those who don't. It sounds counterintuitive. Wouldn't someone living with a partner have more support with health and routines? Sometimes, yes. But studies repeatedly show that many older men living solo become more intentional about their daily habits. Why? Because there's no one else to rely on. No one reminding them to take their medication. No one cooking their meals. No one scheduling their appointments. They become accountable to themselves. And something interesting happens when that responsibility becomes unavoidable. Many men start eating simpler, cleaner meals. They cut back on heavy foods. Some reduce their alcohol intake. Others begin walking every morning, not because someone told them to, but because they realize their health is now entirely in their own hands. Living alone can act like a wake-up call. It becomes a reset. A chance to build a lifestyle that's lighter, healthier, and more aligned with their actual needs, not just long-standing habits. Now let's move to the third truth, and this one doesn't get talked about enough. Older men who live alone often carry invisible emotional scars. But they also carry extraordinary emotional wisdom. Some are alone because they lost a spouse they loved deeply. Others went through painful divorces. Some slowly drifted apart from family members. Behind the quiet routine of their daily lives, there are memories, regrets, and stories that rarely get spoken out loud. But here's what's different about them compared to younger men. They process pain differently. With age comes perspective. Instead of running from emotional discomfort, many of these men have learned to sit with it, to reflect, to accept what cannot be changed, to forgive, sometimes others, sometimes themselves. They've had years to think, years to make peace. And through that process, something powerful forms: wisdom. They understand the fragility of relationships. They understand the importance of time. They understand how quickly life shifts. That depth of awareness shapes them into observers, thinkers, and steady presences. Younger generations often overlook them. But if you sit down and really listen, you'll find insights that only decades of experience can produce. That kind of emotional maturity doesn't come from comfort. It comes from surviving loss, disappointment, and change, and still choosing to move forward. And that's just the beginning. When we continue, we're going to explore why many older men who live alone are far less lonely than people assume, and how living alone can actually reignite freedom, identity, and self-worth in ways that surprise even them. Now let's continue with the fourth truth, because this one challenges one of the biggest myths of all. Many older men who live alone are far less lonely than people believe. We often confuse being alone with being lonely. But they are not the same thing. Loneliness isn't about the number of people in your house. It's about the quality of connection in your life. A man can sit in a crowded living room and still feel invisible. And another man can sit alone in his apartment and feel completely at peace. Older men who live alone often understand this distinction better than anyone. Instead of maintaining dozens of surface-level relationships, they tend to build a few strong, meaningful ones. They talk to the neighbor they trust. They exchange stories with the barista who knows their order. They attend a weekly gathering at a community center. They call an old friend every Sunday. They cherish time with their grandchildren when they can. Their social world may look smaller from the outside, but it often runs deeper. Psychological research consistently shows that a few close relationships are far more protective against loneliness than a large social circle filled with shallow interaction. Quality over quantity becomes the guiding principle. Arthur once put it in a way I'll never forget. He said, "I'm alone, but I'm not empty." There's power in that sentence. Being alone gave him space. But it didn't take away his sense of belonging. He intentionally maintained connection. He chose it. And that choice made all the difference. Now, here's the fifth truth, the one many men don't openly talk about. Living alone in later life often leads to a rediscovery of freedom, identity, and self-worth. For decades, many men lived according to responsibility. They worked demanding jobs. They supported families. They compromised. They adapted. They carried expectations placed on them by spouses, employers, children, and society itself. Then suddenly, life shifts. The house becomes quiet. The schedule opens up. And for the first time in years, sometimes in decades, they wake up and realize something profound. Their time belongs to them. They decide when to sleep and when to wake up. They choose what to eat. They decide how to spend their afternoons. They don't need to negotiate the television channel. They don't need to justify their hobbies. And that autonomy can be incredibly healing. Many older men describe it as rediscovering a version of themselves they had long forgotten. The young man who loved woodworking. The curious mind who enjoyed documentaries. The quiet dreamer who once thought about writing. The spiritual seeker who wanted time to reflect. Gardening becomes more than a pastime, it becomes meditation. Fixing small things around the apartment becomes a source of competence. Learning new technology becomes proof that growth doesn't stop at 70. There's something deeply affirming about realizing you can still choose. And psychologists consistently point to personal choice as one of the strongest predictors of happiness in later life. Control over your own rhythm. Control over your own space. Control over your own direction. That sense of agency rebuilds confidence in subtle but powerful ways. Now, this doesn't mean every day is easy. There are moments of silence that feel heavy. There are anniversaries that stir old emotions. There are mornings when motivation is low. Living alone does not erase human vulnerability. But thriving older men share certain patterns. They stay connected, even if it's just to a few people. They stay physically active, even if it's just daily walks. They stay mentally engaged, reading, learning, thinking. And most importantly, they stay emotionally open. They don't deny their feelings. They acknowledge them, then keep moving. That combination creates resilience. Now let me bring this back to you. Maybe you're a man living alone right now. Maybe you're adjusting to it. Maybe you've been doing it for years. Or maybe you're watching this because you're concerned about your father, your husband, your grandfather. Here's the truth: living alone after 60, 70, or 80 does not automatically determine your happiness. Your habits do. Your mindset does. Your willingness to engage with life does. The difference between isolation and independence is intention. When solitude is chosen, or at least accepted with intention, it becomes strength. When it's resisted without adaptation, it can become suffering. The key is how a man frames his situation. Arthur understood that. One evening, as the sun was setting through his apartment window, casting that warm golden light across the room, he said something that has stayed with me ever since. "Companionship is beautiful," he told me. "But so is independence." At my age, I learned that peace isn't something another person gives you. It's something you build inside yourself. Think about that. Peace isn't delivered by circumstance. It's constructed through perspective. And that's the quiet wisdom many older men living alone carry within them. They've learned that identity doesn't disappear when a partner does. Worth doesn't fade when the house gets quiet. Purpose doesn't end when routines change. In some cases, it finally begins. So whether you're 62, 75, or 84, whether you're living alone by choice or by circumstance, remember this: you are not defined by who shares your home. You are defined by how you live within it. If this message resonated with you, share your age in the comments. Tell us whether you live alone or whether someone you love does. Your story might be exactly what another person needs to hear today. And make sure you're subscribed to Still Becoming, where we continue exploring the emotional journey of aging with strength, clarity, and dignity. Because growing older isn't about shrinking. It's about becoming. Now, before we truly close this conversation, I want to go even deeper, because there's another layer to this that rarely gets acknowledged. When an older man lives alone, the world often focuses on what he has lost. A spouse. A routine. A role. A house full of noise. But very few people stop to ask what he might have gained. And that shift in perspective changes everything. Many men in their 60s, 70s, and 80s spent the majority of their lives being needed. They were providers, protectors, problem solvers. Their identity was tied to responsibility. There was always someone depending on them. Then life transitions. Retirement arrives. Children move away. A partner may pass on. And suddenly, the constant demand disappears. For some, that silence feels frightening at first. But for others, after the adjustment period, it becomes something unexpected: space. Space to reflect. Space to breathe. Space to ask questions they never had time to ask before. Who am I without my job title? Who am I without someone else defining my daily role? What actually brings me peace? Older men who navigate this transition successfully don't just pass the time. They rebuild meaning. And meaning, especially in later life, becomes more important than busyness. Some begin mentoring younger people informally, sharing life lessons over coffee. Others volunteer quietly in their communities. Some reconnect with siblings or old friends after years of distance. Some finally take their spiritual life seriously. Others dive into books they always meant to read. The common thread isn't activity for activity's sake. It's intention. They move from living by obligation to living by design. And that shift can be incredibly empowering. There's also something else that happens when a man lives alone long enough. He becomes deeply familiar with himself. Not the version of himself he presented to coworkers. Not the version shaped by marriage dynamics. Not the version that was constantly reacting to other people's needs. But the core self underneath all of that. He learns his real rhythms. He notices what drains him and what restores him. He recognizes which memories still hurt and which ones bring gratitude. That kind of self-awareness is rare in younger years because life is so loud. But in later life, especially in solitude, self-knowledge can flourish. And here's something important for families watching this. If you have a father or grandfather living alone, resist the urge to automatically see him as fragile. Check in, yes. Support him, absolutely. But don't strip him of dignity by assuming he is incapable. Many older men take quiet pride in managing their own space, paying their own bills, cooking their own meals, fixing small things around the house. Those tasks aren't burdens to them, they're proof of continued competence. Independence, even in small forms, reinforces identity. And identity is deeply tied to mental well-being. Of course, balance matters. No one thrives in total isolation. The strongest older men living alone understand that independence and connection are not opposites, they are partners. They protect their autonomy, but they also accept help when truly needed. They enjoy solitude, but they don't shut the world out. They create a rhythm that works for them. And that rhythm may not look like what society expects. Some wake up at 5 a.m. and walk while the world is quiet. Some stay up late reading. Some eat dinner at 4 p.m. Some keep the television off entirely. When you live alone, you're free to build a life that fits your energy instead of adjusting constantly to someone else's. That freedom can feel strange at first, but over time, it often becomes deeply satisfying. Let's also address something honestly. There will be hard days. Days when the silence feels heavier than usual. Days when memories feel close. Days when motivation dips. That's not failure. That's humanity. Thriving older men don't avoid those days. They develop small strategies to move through them. A walk outside. A phone call. A short visit to a familiar place. A routine that anchors them. Resilience at that age doesn't look dramatic. It looks steady. It's found in consistency. It's found in choosing to engage with life, even gently, even imperfectly. And here's the message I hope truly lands. Living alone in your later years is not a verdict. It's a circumstance. What you build within that circumstance determines your experience. You can build bitterness. Or you can build depth. You can build isolation. Or you can build selective, meaningful connection. You can drift. Or you can design. Arthur once told me something else during one of our last conversations. He said, when you're young, you think happiness comes from having everything around you. When you're older, you realize it comes from being okay within yourself. That sentence carries decades of refinement. So if you are a man watching this and you live alone, understand this, your life is not smaller because your household is smaller. Your value is not reduced because your dinner table has one chair occupied. And if you're someone who loves a man living alone, offer him respect alongside support. Ask him about his routines. Ask him what he enjoys. Listen to his stories, not as a duty, but as a privilege. Because inside many of these quiet apartments are men who have learned how to stand emotionally on their own 2 feet. Men who have survived love and loss. Men who have adapted more times than they can count. Men who may not say much, but who understand life in ways that can't be rushed. Aging is not about fading away. It's about distilling. And sometimes, when a man lives alone in his 70s or 80s, what you're really witnessing isn't loneliness. It's refinement. If this conversation meant something to you, share your age below. Share your experience. Your honesty might encourage someone who's adjusting to this season of life right now. And stay connected here on Still Becoming, where we continue honoring the strength, dignity, and quiet power that come with growing older. Because the journey doesn't end at 60. In many ways, that's where the deeper understanding begins.